Pete, Stephen, 2024 is coming to an end, and as is tradition for this company, figured we do our annual Founders Reflections podcast. So, welcome to both of you. We will, I think, with our very small amount of planning that we've done for this, we will cover this in a handful of sections. So, we will, I guess, like first of all, jump into personal developments this year. We will cover company developments this year. We'll talk about the things that have changed in the Instant IO product as well. And then if we have enough time and we haven't used it up by, mocking each other and all the other things, we will talk about next year as well at the end. Sound good?
Yes,
Let's do it.
Good. I'm enjoying that personal development sounds like we're going to start with like how I feel like I've grown as a person in 2024.
Yeah. This is Pete's surprise. This is actually your performance review from Stephen and I. So we're going to give you your little development points. So brace yourself. No, let's kick off. I think biggest personal development this year is in the Hamilton household. Pete, do you want to fill in what's happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Maisie was born in September, and so honestly, it's 8:20. So you're lucky I even showed up to this. I should be in bed about half an hour ago. But yeah, no, it's awesome. Love being a dad round two, and sort of like figuring out how to juggle all of that's been an interesting and fun exercise. But yeah, as always, felt super supported by company, and I returned to a company that was both still there and not in flames. So that was appreciated. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I mean, supported to your face, obviously.
Yes, I mean,
behind your back, like it was like the things this guy will do to not build this effing company. Another baby on the way next year, I presume, Pete. So you can have your little mid-year holiday.
Yeah, keeping this up is going to be really tricky, but I really appreciate this like month off that I get once every 2 years. It's great.
Yeah. Month off. All of the parents out there just like crying into their Muslims when you say that.
Yeah, I think you once and only once described it as Pete was on holiday, and I think you walked it back extremely quickly, which I appreciated because it meant I didn't have to kill you.
Yeah. I mean, my kids are much older, so I've forgotten what it's like in the early days. These days, I come home and I'm like, brush your teeth, get your pajamas on, and go to bed. I'll come up and read you a story in a minute, and it's like, yeah, it's easy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but if they didn't want to do any of those things and would scream and fight you the entire way. So yeah, it's not a million miles away.
Yep, 100%. Stephen, similar big developments in the Whitworth household. What's been going on, Shay Whitworth?
Yeah, I can see in this document it says Stephen bought an Apple Vision Pro, which I guess is some kind of reflection of my family life. No babies this year, but did add a Vision Pro to the collection.
For what it's worth, I would have picked Trip of a Lifetime Safari, but no, Apple Vision Pro. that's the route we've gone down.
Do you want to talk about the Safari, Stephen? How was it?
Talk about the Safari. It's fucking awesome.
It was great. Yeah, I've never done one of those before. So it was kind of wild just being like literally right next to a lion. So I went with my wife, and we saw a lion. Maybe the first 10 minutes we'd got like out into the vehicle, and she was just sat essentially at like a 45-degree slant, just like like because of the line being so close. And I was like, as if that would save you, like sort of 45 degrees offset is the difference between a lion, mauling you to death or not. But anyway, actually like beautiful. Had never been to Africa before, so spent like a bunch of time there. And then I try and do like one sort of reasonable vacation a year. So this was like 10 days out. Managed to get a little bit of a switch off, and then again, lovely to come back to the Vision Pro.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry to leave it behind.
Chris, did you do any traveling last year? I know you're just be itching to talk about it.
I don't like to mention it, Pete, except for posting on LinkedIn every time I go to the the Virgin entranceway.
I think your suitcase has genuinely been on LinkedIn more times than I've posted this year.
Yeah, it's been. I think it's been. I thought. So I spoke to my wife at the beginning of this year, and I was like, I promise it's going to be a quieter year for travel this year. It wasn't a quieter year for travel this year. So pulled my stats. So I used Flighty, which is like awesome
Ooh,
app
nice
for
stat.
anyone traveling. I pulled my stats, and so I've done 112,000 miles in the air, which is the equivalent of basically 4.5 laps of the Earth, which is I think, quite a significant sort of
Quite a
distance
lot.
to travel. But then the really shocking thing is like literally 9.5 days at 30,000 or 40,000 feet, whatever height planes fly at, which is like, it's kind of wild that I've spent that amount of time, in a cabin in
Yeah.
premium economy,
It's a lot
probably
of Blade
working.
Runner reruns, isn't it?
I genuinely wish that was what it was. I've got to the point where after about the first 2 months, I'd rinsed through the entirety of the good stuff on Virgin's, entertainment system. And so I get on flights and I'm like, crappy Wi-Fi, trying to use Slack, which is
Yeah.
the
You're not
worst.
working on flights, Chris? Just
Well,
watching Blade Runner. Great. That's why I know why you always fly on Thursdays and Fridays.
yeah, exactly. Doing nothing. It's just an excuse to get extra holiday time.
Yeah, I think it's yeah. Joking aside, I think sort of I think there's probably a few times where we've sent you away for like 5 days, and maybe in hindsight, could have given you a break. But I think most of the trips were like super worthwhile, right? We're going to talk about some of it now, but it's kind of Sev Zero, like offsites, all that good stuff.
Let's talk about that, because that was, I think I was reflecting on like what are my highlights of the year, and I think
Yeah,
that was one of the ones where I had such little idea of how complicated and hard it would be to put on a good conference. Like it was, I genuinely think it was worse than my wedding, probably partly because my wife Jo did most of the work on the wedding. Um, but Sev Zero, so it was our first conference, ran it in San Francisco, not even like massive by any sort of conference stretch, but wanted to make it obviously like an incredibly impressive. Like basically, I think you get one chance. This is one of those things where if you get
yeah,
your first one wrong, no one comes to the second one, and if you get your first one very, very right, everyone comes to every subsequent one, and you sort of get the good snowball effect. So, had that on our shoulders, I guess. But I think, I think it went phenomenally. Like my reflections of like looking back, and we've got all the videos, obviously. Like to sort of look back and be able to go like, who spoke at your first F Zero, and you're like, well, there's this company called like Netflix. There's this company called OpenAI. There's Plaid. There's Slack. Bunch of other incredible people. All talking at our little conference. I don't know. I came away just very, very proud of what our little company achieved on that day. I think it was a great win for us.
like I had the joy of not really being able to do any of the prep or having to be involved because I was off on paternity leave. So I basically just rocked up, enjoyed a really, really awesome conference, met a bunch of our customers, had some lovely food, amazing conversations, talked about product for about 8 hours, and then got back on a plane and came home. But yeah, I think it was genuinely super impressive. The talk caliber was amazing. I heard loads of people saying like this. I don't know how to interpret this, but a lot of people were like, "Oh, this was surprisingly good," and I was like, "Thank you." Yeah.
Cool. Stephen, you haven't spoke about Sub Zero. You did a keynote. How do you feel it went?
Yeah, I thought it was great. So we have done a few smaller events like dinners and things like that, but this was sort of fully owned by us with all of the topics and like speakers put together. So I gave a 30-minute keynote at the start, which was essentially trying to share, like what are the learnings that we've seen from working with hundreds of companies and thousands of people at this point. And really, like I talked about this incident maturity model, which is the idea that like most companies start off with this like small centralized teams. They then starts to like break under the weight of too many incidents as the company scales. They then want to push this out to engineering more broadly to run incidents, but that also has its problems. And then the kind of end state that most people get to is this like idea of democratization. So anyone and everyone around the company gets involved in incident management. It's been a very common pattern of all the companies that we've tended to work with. And yeah, so I spoke through sort of like what that tends to look like and the pros and cons of each. And we were very clear that like we didn't want we wanted this to be a conference sort of like Sev Zero hosted by Incident IO, as opposed to like the Incident IO product event of autumn, blah, blah, blah. So I think we landed that blend quite nicely. And then at the end, people came up to us and like, oh, you have a product. I didn't realize, maybe we should. So maybe we should have been a little bit more forthright. And then the other learning was that I was taken aback by like the distance that some people flew to be there. So we had people from England and from Dublin and from Europe. And as a result, like I think, this is mostly customers from our perspective. We're going to do, we're going to do Sev Zero Europe and Sev Zero US, both to sort of reduce the amount of traveling that people might need to do. But we also have big customer bases there. And then we're also going to do customer events around the Sev Zero event. So it means that people can, A, get more involved in the product, and B, just like spend more time together. Because I was like, oh, I haven't seen this person in ages. They're going to be here for an hour and then they're going to be back on the plane. So yeah, I thought it was great. Excited to go bigger and better next year, and now we have like a bit more of a function to kind of help support that. But we'll speak about that a bit later.
You've alluded to it, but I think this year, big year for leadership team. Some exceptional hires after what has felt like a very, very long time of sort of searching for the right people. I think it does take a long time to find the right people because these are such pivotal roles. So I think we both started, you on like CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, me on Chief Marketing Officer, given what we were doing and running at the times. Started in like February, and it was, what was it, like October where we finally
September.
So September time. Yes, right around Sub Zero, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's when Pete was on holiday.
yeah, he was on his annual baby holiday. Yeah, exactly. But yes, so we have Mohit's joined us. We've had Tom join us, and then Kristen join us as well for like head of CS. And it was that. I think it was like an amazing 2 weeks to be like basically all these processes just kind of converged and narrowed down, and then we had this 2 week period of like, hey, well, we can all start in this little spell here, and it's like, oh my gosh, from sort of founders sort of running things to suddenly being like, oh my gosh, we have exceptional leaders in place. Felt like, I described it internally as the company as like that scene in Lord of the Rings where like Gandalf comes riding over the hill with the whole army just when they're like fatigued and running out and stuff, which is maybe a bit nerdy, but feels very good. Feels good. I'm feeling very happy about where we've landed. Stephen, any thoughts? Just like, yeah, nailed it, completed it.
Yeah.
Next challenge.
Yep. Happy chappy. Good to get people going. And it was also just a feeling of like, as you start companies, you obviously have a great sense for like the persona that you're selling to and the product and how it solves those things. And then one of the challenges is essentially like kind of scaling that out. So hiring people, but then, multiple reps, getting them up to productivity, but then also supporting functions around that. And it's like that's not as intuitive as, hey, I built this product to solve my particular pain point. It's like now I have to teach people that haven't had that pain point and I need to do it at scale. And that's luckily what amazing go-to-market leaders literally spend all day, every day for 10, 15, 20 years doing. So it's awesome to have them on board and sort of have that expertise and now feel like very well set up going into 2025 with, a really, really great team.
Nice. Final thing before we move into product. This was the year, and I had to actually go back and look because I couldn't believe it was only this year. This was the year that we were able to sort of announce to the world that we were working with Netflix, which felt like
good point.
It felt this is honestly one of the things that I find hardest about building a company is when the companies that I know that we get to work with and the ones that we get to talk about publicly are very different sets of companies.
Yeah.
And so to be in a world where we're able to be like, one of the companies that I enjoy working with most that is sort of stretching the product in all the right places and really, really deploying it at what feels like very significant scale, which is putting a lot of pressure and test on us, which is great. But to be able to talk about that felt like amazing. So Hank, if you're listening, thank you for doing that case study with us. It's been like genuinely awesome to work with you on that, and also Molly and all the other folks that we've had the pleasure of working with. It's genuinely been like, it's one of those things. Every time I'm asked to join a call with Netflix, I'm like, this is going to be great. These are smart people that want great things that are very aligned with where we're going. Stephen, you often talk about getting excited working with companies that your mum's heard of. I assume Christina has heard of Netflix, is aware of that.
Yes, she has heard of it. She, for a very long time, the way that they would watch Netflix was by connecting the Nintendo Wii to the TV and then watching Netflix on that. And it doesn't even have a HDMI connection. So it was sort of like, I don't know, the equivalent of like watching videos on like 320p or something like that. But good to know that sort of despite technological challenges, Netflix prevails. But Netflix was definitely one of the big ones. And yeah, very proud from a kind of founder perspective to be able to reach that milestone.
Right. Let's pick up the pace and talk about product. So I pulled some stats coming into this, just for sort of like anchoring of where we're at this year. So how many incidents do you think we have have helped resolve this year without looking at the notes that you?
Two things. One, you're asking questions that we can literally read the answers to in the notes. And secondly, I like how you were like, so I pulled some stats. Like, fuck off. I pulled the stats.
Back to Chris's terrible game show of stats that Pete pulled. Chris is pretending that they don't know the answer to. Number of years of responder time. So we track like actual hours that people spend on incidents. So not like the dumb incident was 3 hours. There were two people, therefore it's six. Like the actual like, oh well, some of those people worked a bit of time here and a bit of time here. And we have the stat on how many. Well, I'm going to give it away. How many years that has been? It's been 58. 58 human years have been spent
How
on.
wild is that? That blows my
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. It's absolutely silly. But I tell you, the one that surprised me most of these stats that I myself, Chris, pulled is the number of status page views. So it's been a big year for status pages, a lot of adoption of that. So we had like a bunch of great companies. Like we started the year with Intercom moving over.
Yeah.
So
Square.
yeah, amazing. Like a
Yeah.
bunch of very very legit companies that are sort of putting Incident.io behind them to be able to communicate with their customers. 135 million views.
So when I was polling the team, they were like, maybe 1 million people have seen a status page, maybe like 1,500,000. And you're like, more. And sort of you edge them up past 10 million and they're like, wow, double digit millions. That's really cool. And you're like, keep going. Like, it's 135 million. And that to be clear, is like excluding bots and sort of scanners and crons and all sorts of other stuff that like scrape our pages constantly. So yeah, that's wild. And
Yeah.
thanks to the team at Vercel who kind of, a core part of that infrastructure. They've kind of helped us scale to terabytes of traffic and 135 million views. Who would have called it?
Yeah. Anyway, talking of on call, in its
close.
fraction of a year that it's 3/4 of a year that it's been in existence. I actually genuinely can't believe that has been only launched this year.
Yeah.
It feels like it has been around forever.
Yeah, on call. So I guess to kind of paint how we thought about the product, like we started off with a product that you had like your existing paging provider wake you up, and then it really felt like the software sort of ended at that time point, and that kind of gap was where we started. Was okay, they'll wake you up, we'll do everything else in the process. So we started there. We then built status pages, so a way to tell your customers about it. But it was always very obvious that there was this like part of the life cycle that we didn't, wasn't on our platform, and it was just like obviously logical that we would go there. And it was always a frustration internally, which is like, when are we going to do it? Do we have the sort of like people to do it? There's obviously high resiliency requirements for a product like this. You need to be working when everyone else is broken, et cetera, et cetera. So like we took our time to do it. So approximately like 2 and a bit years into the life of the company, maybe a bit longer, until we had that released. But it's obviously like, it's obviously like such a well-known thing that people already have, but it also makes the rest of our platform stronger. And yeah, after we released it, we saw like incredible traction. So we went from 0 customers to now about 70% of all of our customers have ripped out their existing incumbent provider and replaced them with us, which is like the number I think that's like incredibly energizing, which is okay, like we have a new thing, but people are prepared to replace their existing products with us. It's also a great like surface for us to build like future products on top of. So we're always, as we help wake you up to deal with problems, help you respond to them, help you communicate with customers, we're always trying to search for like a better together way to use all of these things together. So for example, it's now you can surface more and more information directly to end users. Like in mobile apps, that means that like as they're kind of squinting at this thing on the way to their laptop, like they can get like genuinely up to speed really, really quickly. There's a bunch of AI stuff that we can talk about that I think makes that materially better. And then, yeah, we saw some like very big kind of wholesale migrations over to us as well. And that's something that we've invested, time in like migration tooling to make it easier. But like we've just started from that perspective. Our goal is to make it sort of ridiculously easy to go from your existing provider over to us. And yeah, it was the first point at which we could really start saying like we are a platform instead of just like a kind of
Yeah.
product in the part of a life cycle. And now we're seeing that like as we explain ourselves as like an all-in-one incident management solution, you can see people that are like, oh yeah, my existing provider does only do this thing, and you do all of these things, and it makes way more sense for me to kind of fold that all into one. So yeah, a highlight of the year has put a real tailwind behind the business, especially in like specific segments, which has kind of propelled a bunch of the growth. And then as we go into next year with some of our much larger like enterprise customers, like very excited about the work that we'll be able to do there. So yeah, I think the highlight of product, like in product, like the highlight of the year for me, and it's one of those moments that kind of alters the growth trajectory like
Yeah.
upwards, and it never stops, which
Yeah.
means it sort of pays off more and more into the future. So yeah, real high point from my side.
Yeah.
I feel like you're bringing very much the grown-up energy to this conversation.
Yeah.
But given that we are
It's
being
all right,
grown up,
someone has to.
but given that we're being grown ups momentarily, you sort of reminded me of like the stuff that I'm genuinely actually really excited about on the product side, which is like with status pages, response, and on call now in the mix. It's all of the fun conversations and the products that we're building on the boundaries of those things, which I think is the stuff that no one's done very well before. So there are paging products, there are status page products. There hasn't really been any very good like incident response products that sort of work in the way that we do. But like if you look at like just a couple of examples there, like the stuff that we've seen customers doing with, where we can be like, great, well, if a bunch of people will go and look at your status page, that is now an alert that is like native within the platform and can automatically be created as a sort of paging incident of like, hey, go look at this thing, or a non-paging one that's plugged direct into Slack. And so like now you have like a new source of like, well, maybe you haven't detected a problem, but we have, because your customers are all looking at your status page, which is like, great. You could wire this stuff up, and I have done in the past with like various different like systems and things, but it always felt janky. And then the other thing is the stuff that we're working on very actively, which is like, we now have all of your alerts flowing through the platform if you use on call and response. And alerts create incidents are like signal of like what a human is doing about those alerts, and we can start to do the kind of feedback loop of like, hey, when this alert fires, it normally leads to a really bad incident. And as you say, like that means on mobile apps we can surface that kind of, whilst you're on your way to your laptop, be like, right, last time this alert fired, it was a sev1, everything went terribly. Conversely, though, you could have those alerts that are just those like flappy ones that are noisy and distracting, and to be able to get that kind of signal when you're in bed, which is like, pager goes off, chain smokers ringing on your phone, and you can basically go, well, like 90% of the time this alert is absolutely nothing, and so you get the kind of like, well, maybe I'll quickly triage it from here versus getting into whatever else. And obviously all of that leads to these like, I mean, the stuff that we hear time and time again from customers, like, alert fatigue is the thing that runs rife in most organizations. It's so easy to add alerts, and it's so hard to sort of justify removing them. And if you can get that signal, which is like, hey, these ones are literally never, ever, ever actioned, but they are consuming, some unbelievable amount of like hours of your engineering team, just turn them off. Absolute gold. So I'm really excited to see that stuff land in the world.
Shout out to, I think it's Michael at Bud. They were the first adopters of our on-call product, which I think he's very proud of. I promised him at some point I'm going to frame his sort of signed contract as the first person to ever use Instant IO on-call. Haven't delivered yet, but I promise I will do that, Michael, if you're listening to this.
If he's listening to this, if I know Michael, he'll be subscribed to our podcast. He'll be getting this day one.
I'd be horrified if he wasn't.
He'll be
He'll
notes.
be very disappointed.
Well, he's not getting his framed. He's not getting his framed celebratory contract if he doesn't. So watch this space.
100%. A little bit of like a this year thing and a big bit of a next year thing on product side. We've managed to make it, however long it is through this podcast so far, without mentioning the two letters that everyone's talking about. Obviously, AI. We shipped a bunch of things early this year, and I think I think sort of I would argue I would look at it, and I know we're always the most critical of our own product, but I'd look at it as like we sprinkled some very, very useful and obvious AI into the product this year, which is broadly, the ability to be able to look at what's happening in an instant channel and periodically drop in and be like, hey, would you like the summary to be updated to this? And it's seen phenomenal uptake, right? Which is just like, it's a very, very easy way to be able to get accurate summaries reflected into incidents. So anyone who's outside the incident or wants to sort of keep abreast of it, like a very good way to do that. We did like suggested follow-ups, which is, look at the whole conversation of what happened in an incident, and when you wrap up, be like, hey, well, midway through that thing, about 8 hours ago in this Sev 1, Pete suggested that maybe we should go and, investigate tuning the database, parameters or something like that. Do you want to log that in linear right now? It's like absolutely great. Those are awesome. Genuinely really happy. We've literally just launched the auto naming of incidents as well, which is again like honestly like such a godsend for me as someone who's not in the weeds of like wanting to know about database transaction XYZ, all the kind of nerdy stuff. It's like, give me something high level. So I think a big year, big adoption, because it's felt very, very natural.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting stuff is some of the stuff that we're doing right now. I'm happy to talk about, Pete, but given it's your domain, maybe one for you to sort of cover off a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. That's what I spend, over half my sort of working day talking about at the moment, and I wouldn't change it for the world. On some of that stuff, like I think, to drop a couple of extra tidbits really quickly, like one of the things that really surprised me, honestly, was the adoption and the uptake and the retention of those AI features. So like, I'm used to kind of decent product adoption and retention. Like, our product is honestly pretty sticky and pretty good. And I was expecting like a little bit of adoption of some of these AI features. It feels like we've sort of sprinkled some really lovely stuff in. It was in January, so it's almost exactly a year ago. But like within a couple of months, we had literally a graph of like number of updates written by humans, and then we introduced number of updates written by sort of AI. And the nice thing was like the whole graph goes up because there's lots more updates happening because people are now leveraging our kind of AI features. But what was then really interesting is like the number of updates stayed relatively constant, but the proportion of updates written by AI is like overtaking the number written by humans. And so you have this really interesting transfer of workload from like people doing stuff to AI doing stuff. And the sort of sentiment and NPS is really, really good. So it's kind of, we literally have a graph that says we've managed to replace like 40% of the effort of writing comms and incidents, for at least for updates, right? And so it's fun to think like what else you can do with that. And big +1 to incident names. Honestly, like surprisingly high impact for such a sort of small feature. Like the fact that we can now throw a highly technical alert into our system, and the incident that gets generated out the other end is just like superhuman. Like it's it comes in as database transaction, blah 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 blah, lock timeout, and then comes out the other end as like, I don't know, like Chris can't view this page in the product and Rory's on it, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. Big +1. In terms of like what we're working on now, so tons of interesting stuff. I'll try and like summarize some of the key bits. So I think Scribe is the latest thing that we've shipped. So that actually went live earlier today. And this is, think like live call transcriptions on steroids. So, how many times have you been in an incident? You're kind of, whether you're using an incident management platform or not, you're going through the Slack sort of history. You reach a point where like someone says, Slack's too slow, let's hop on a call. And suddenly it's like, that's it. Like all context lost, unless you had someone in there taking notes. And even if you had someone in there taking notes, that's often not going to cut it. Like all that context disappears. While that call is ongoing, you have no idea what's happening. Like, do you jump in and interrupt? Who's there? What are they talking about? Like, if you join a call or you leave and rejoin later, like what has everyone been discussing? There's just so many frustrating problems for folks who handle incidents on calls. Scribe is our kind of like first step towards resolving that. And honestly, I think it's one of the slickest things we've shipped this year. So listens to the whole call, transcribes it live, kicks live like topic updates into Slack. So I literally jumped into an incident the other day and I was like, oh, like Noberto, our VP Eng, and Kristen, our head of customer success, were on a call talking about writing some customer comms. And not only did I know they're on a call because it said it in the channel, but it also said like Noberto and Kristen are currently discussing the list of customers and whether they want to do standard comms or independent comms for each of the individual customers. And like, I didn't even have to join the call. I was like, that's great. They're talking about the stuff I want them to. I don't need to join the call. And then when they made a decision, it kicked that straight into the channel. And you're like, the fact that we can do that now honestly, is like super mind blowing. And I think it's really, really cool. And that is probably not even the most exciting thing that we are currently working on with AI. So kind of the big ones that we're investing in at the moment are, I remember when we launched Instant IO, you used to have to talk to Incident, and it was kind of shit because we were basically doing Slack / commands, like, sort of CLI style, but with like @incident. And so I remember when we turned it off and we were like, no one wants to talk to like an agent or a bot. It's like not a thing. And this was probably like 3-4 years ago now, right? And then since then, with the rise of sort of LLMs and ChatGPT and all of those things, like bots are cool again now. And so we've gone full pendulum swing back to like, well, actually, why shouldn't you just be able to like chat with Incident IO, right? Like we know about all your historic incidents, we know about all your deploys, we know about all your code changes, we know about your infrastructure, we know about like who did what when. We now know literally everything everyone said on calls. Like, why can't I just ask questions or like ask it to help me with my incident? And so we're really starting to invest in that direction. I think, some of the things, sneak previews, but some of the stuff you're going to see from us is like really, really impressive sort of assistant conversational UI, which our team are absolutely loving internally. And we're starting to turn on for some early beta customers now and similar feedback from them. I think I've never seen so many sort of like, oh my gods, and like, holy shit, this is actually pretty good. I'm quite surprised. Well, I don't know why everyone's surprised when we ship good product after 4 years of doing it, but like that's been really nice. And then the natural extension of that is like, well, rather than you going, hey, can you go poke this thing? Can you go see which customers are affected? Can you go find me the logs? Like, why do you even have to ask? Like, why can't we as a company go and check the 20 things that you check at the start of every single incident on your behalf, so that when you rock up, it's all there ready for you and you can kind of make some quick decisions. And then if you want to clarify anything, that conversational UI is there. So sort of, I'll pause there, but like those 3 things alone, like, now being able to see, hear, interact with everything on calls, being able to interact with Incident IO in a conversational way, and then, being able to proactively investigate incidents on your behalf, like totally game changing trio of features. And yeah, we're barely getting started. And then when you hook them all together, that's where the magic is, right? You can tell that my job is product and I get very excited about it, but I genuinely am. I think 2025 is going to be so good. I'm really, really hyped.
Yeah, for this is like this product and like these sets of products have generally been quite reactive. So you have like, like ways to automate things that you would like to have happen. And what that does for companies is like ensure consistency or like raise the floor of how good any incident is. So I think of it as like making the interns comfortable with running incidents on day 3, right? And as a result, like that's great. Running a incident response process at Netflix scale is really, really hard. You have thousands of engineers that you'd like to do things consistently. So that is really, really valuable. That's what we've done so far. The next stage is like, okay, well, let's say that like what are, the people that buy our product want to do is basically fix things faster with like less human time spent on it. You can do that by taking work off of people's plate, by removing some of the process that they have to focus on in incidents, taking away the scribe role that you need to do by copying things. Like we're kind of reducing things there. To me, the next way to reduce that significantly is become a proactive product, which then takes hey, there's a set of smoking guns and like I don't know which one there is, and I forgot my like login, so I have to go and do all of those things. It's like, let us, with all of our knowledge of every single incident you've solved before, all of the deploys, all of the changes, integrating into your APM software, it's like we can actually do a pretty good job of like, like it's these 2 smoking guns, or is it literally this problem right here? And then that just becomes a function that we can like just optimize over time. It's like it will only ever get better as we get more data, more information, and like more engineering, more investment. So we'll get faster and faster at doing that. And like the goal of the company is to make the value and the ROI of buying this product so ridiculously obvious that you just want to cancel whatever you were doing next week and implement it. And that I think is like the next biggest improvement that we can make to that. We were just talking about this earlier, and like, yeah, I think it's a huge step for us. It's going to be very, very soon in like out into the world, and yeah, very excited to see it in the hands of customers.
it's been genuinely really wild seeing it evolve as well in the labs. Like I don't think I've seen the team go on quite such a roller coaster of like, oh my god, look what it did, and then they'd be like, oh my god, what is it even doing?
Yeah.
And it's
Dunning
like I
Kruger,
think
right?
I was talking to Lisa about it, and she's like, it's sort of like it's not like software engineering; it's like raising a toddler,
Yeah.
and you're kind of like it just does random things. It's like I've
Can
just poked myself
confirm.
in the eye. Is that what I'm supposed to do?
Yeah. It
So
oscillates
yeah,
between sort of like, genius kid in Mentor and like kid in sandpit eating sand. Like it just alternates wildly between the two. And you're like, have moments where like, oh my God, did it really just like infer that from everything in the channel? And then other times
yeah.
it'll just randomly decides that, anyway, it doesn't do it anymore. But we've had some great interactions where it's just done the most random things and been like, done, and you're like, that was literally nothing remotely related to what I wanted you to do. But the interesting bit genuinely with like engineering with AI is like trying to unpick why it's done the thing, because it's like relentlessly logical, right? And so sort of if you can unpick it, you can really figure out like why it's doing what it's doing in a lot of cases. But there's still some edge cases where AI is just this mystery box which just occasionally goes wrong.
Yeah,
And
I think
we're figuring it out.
yeah, I've genuinely like really enjoyed watching as a sort of an engineer, watching the team
Mm,
actually take what is kind of quite messy, almost like feel like human interactions when you're talking with like a large language model and turn it into something that feels much more like software engineering. So like working with evals and all of the other things that go on there, and like when things go wrong, it's like great, this is now an opportunity to
mhm.
tighten up like how this works. And it's like basically it's like you can see it sort of optimizing and triangulating in on being a very
Yeah.
very robust good solution. So I don't know.
And it's kind of
It's go on.
on that stuff is wild to me that like it becomes very meta because if you essentially say like if you have an example of something that did not work and you have a human justified explanation of why you thought that was a bad thing, you can then just go and get the model to suggest rewrites to the prompts and the system to
Yeah.
optimize more closely for that. So essentially the way to improve these AI systems is essentially just like more and more AI at different layers, which
Yeah.
is obviously very self-reinforcing, but it's just such a interesting way. Like I saw Millie, one of our engineers, just like spitting out reports after reports of like, here's all the failures that happened in the last few hours. Here's suggested tweaks we might want to make to the system. And like, yeah, we are always trying to think of the company as like little engines and systems and like reinforcing
Mhm.
loops. And, if one reinforcing loop is improving the ability to find the smoking gun. Like, another loop underneath that is kind of given the failures, how quickly do we make, like, how accurately and how quickly do we improve that system underneath it? And you
Yeah.
have all of these things that kind of link up together. So yeah, it's wild. I'm very excited to see it out into the world. It will be it's going to be like the biggest change, I guess, for the product in
Yeah.
terms of like our capabilities. But I mean, last time we did this, we did on call, and that went
Yeah.
pretty well. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see if we can match it this time.
Right, we've almost well, in fact we've clearly overused all of our time. But
Yeah. But like
final point.
50% of our conversation was just like bullshit hazing of each other. So
Yeah, I said the one rule going into this was make my life easy for editing, and you've definitely not done that. So thank you both.
zero regrets.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about San Francisco office? It feels like a significant enough milestone to sort of round off, and a nice one to sort of going into next year. So uh, we have opened a San Francisco office, or we are very close to opening it. We have signed leases, and we are in the process of getting internet for said office. But yeah, I don't. Have either of you seen it yet? Stephen, you've been out, haven't you?
Seen it? Yep, 531 Howard Street. So very close to the Bay Bridge. Yeah, it's great. It's I guess like humble beginnings, which I think is important for offices to start at because it's like, well, you are actually building like a kind of new limb, I guess, to the company, and you don't want to land in a place where like, there's sort of so many avocados and they're all delicious and like, we have all this like amazing stuff because it's like, well, actually, no, you kind of need to like it needs to earn its keep a bit, right? To start
Just
with.
really
And like
enjoying that your definition of a really plush office is one full to the brim with avocados. Like
yeah, it's not
if
mine. We employ tech workers. It's a pretty
Yeah,
reasonable
yeah,
stereotype at this point.
kombucha on tap.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's sort of humble space for like 15, 20 people. And the reason that we wanted to open up there was because, you know, really, really simple. It's just where a lot of our customers are. So if you think about, you know, uh,
Careful
Netflix,
and
and I'm trying to think about all the people that are
Should
within
do what we did
walking
last
distance of
time,
the
just name them
office.
all and make Chris bleep them all out because he loves editing these podcasts so much.
Yes, I'll sum up by saying many of our largest customers are walkable distances from our office, which means that we should not have to. If we're in the US, it seems dumb to have to fly to go and see them when we can just be there. So doing that, but then also we have a lot of like I think there's a lot of great people that we can hire out there and will be directly there. So we have Mohit, who will be running the office, who's building out a sort of like, you know, more of the sales and the go-to-market function out there. And then ultimately, like, we've got really good at being an international company. So we started in London. We then went to the US really quickly. So like a year and a bit after we started, that means you have a forced minimum 5 hour time difference. And in some cases, often quite a lot more. We have people on the West Coast already. So it's like, if that's one of the negatives, we got quite good at it. So it like negates the downside. And I just think there's so much upside. So yeah, it's exciting to do it. I think we should be in 2nd of January, maybe like fingers crossed. And if we don't get internet, we'll just use a Starlink or whatever, like hang one out the window and get direct access to a satellite. And then yeah, we'll be building it out. So if people are, you know, if you're a technical support engineer, an SDR, you're on BDR teams, you're an enterprise rep, you're a commercial rep, we are hiring for a large number of roles out there. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, hey, I don't actually like avocados. You know, I would love to go to an avocadoless office. You know, feel free to feel free to put your application in Instant.io/careers. I'm joking, but you know, we would like great people to apply. So you know, if it interests you, we would love to chat.
Nice. Yeah, come join us for no avocados. Is the
Yeah.
message there?
Let's list more things that we don't offer to convince people
Yeah.
to come work for us. That'd be
Yeah,
good.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we don't
quite a
have
long list.
chairs. Don't believe in sitting down. We're always on the go.
Yeah. All right, I think we have used up all of the allocated time and then some. Let's wrap up with a what are we all doing for Christmas? Pete, you first. What's on the docket for Christmas at the Hamilton household?
So we have taken the opportunity now that we have two kids to kind of, you know, lay down our line and say that we're not going anywhere for Christmas and everyone is going to come to us. So my family have been really lovely about that. And it's cool. It's like, it feels like a really grown up Christmas when your family come to you, where like I've basically been to my parents sort of every Christmas for the entirety of my life to this point. And responsibly, I've even pre-ordered our Christmas Day meal from the butcher. So I'm confident that we are actually going to feed people. I'm sure we're going to have a hilarious, like, you know, realizing we forgot to order something incredibly critical on Christmas Eve. But so far, so good. And yeah, really looking forward to it. I think, yeah, it'd be really nice to celebrate. And also, Alfie's now 2, which is like a real Christmas age, if that makes sense. So, like, he knows what presents are. He knows that there's things in them. He's excited to like unwrap them. We've already had one incident where he's unwrapped one of the presents under the tree and doesn't understand that there's a month to go. So yeah, really looking forward to actually letting him loose on
Doesn't
that. And
understand.
yeah, kids at Christmas is the best.
Yep, nice. Can I ask what meat you've ordered from the butchers? Are you a turkey person?
So we had a big debate about this, me and Agnes, because there's a lot riding on it, right? As our first hosting of Christmas, we've gone goose.
Right.
Rogue choice.
Mhm.
Rogue choice. I can see Stephen's eye rolling when I asked that. He's like,
It's just,
"Come on, let's wrap it up." Stephen,
hope you like fat because your goose is about to deflate by about, you know, 80% from what I can tell. It's just all
What the fuck?
fat,
What are you
nuts
going to
out.
have for your Christmas meal? All right, no goose.
Stephen.
Haven't figured it out yet. So I live in New York and my brother lives in Montreal, which means that sort of gravity of the family is now like, you know, and my parents are in the UK, sorry, but like there's kind of more of us now in the US than there is in the UK. So my parents and my sister are coming to New York, and then we're all renting a big house out in Long Island for a few days,
Nice.
which will be really nice. So kind of snowy, cold. Don't know what we're doing about the meat situation, but I'm sort of fiercely anti-turkey, just sort of on principle. And then I think lamb is the easiest one in that like it's not going to be bad, but it's probably not going to be like amazing. And if you want to go dangerous, basically the highest max is probably like beef, but it has like the lowest min as well if you get it wrong. So I'm trying to figure out basically how much work do I want to
Spot
do
the
and
data engineer. He's like
how
I
he's
know.
got his double axis. He's got his graphs out. He's figuring out like he's got his 4 quadrant
distributions.
meat distribution algorithm.
Ask a simple question, man, and
Yeah,
it's like, you've got graphs about me.
Well, you're a
Um,
simple man, Chris. What are you doing?
so I'm a turkey person, just for what it's worth,
of course
and
you are.
you can roll your eyes, but I'm a man of tradition,
Can you do it
and
well?
I grew up on turkey, and it's the only time of year that I'll eat turkey, and I like the theater of cooking the turkey and having the full table laid and family and all that stuff. So for us, quite a one this year actually. So we have just the four of us, my wife and two boys at home for Christmas Day, and then
Nice.
the day after Boxing Day we go off to the French Alps skiing for a week, which will be delightful. It's like my sort of idea of like absolute peak holiday is
Dream
one
Christmas.
Fourth
ski.
ski trip of the year, Chris? Is it?
I wish it was the fourth one. I make an annual trip at best to go skiing. So yes, I think deserved time off to go and be breathing in some alpine air. But yes, right. Let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much. Good chat as always. I have some editing to do, but yeah, until 2025 December, we'll speak again then.
Yeah, pleasure building business with you.
See ya.
Bye.